Councillors, the time now is 6 o'clock. It's Thursday the 30th of July 2020. I'd like to officially open the special council meeting for this evening. I'd like to start with the declaration and we acknowledge, of course, the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land, and we also pay our respects to elders, both past and present. Can I ask everybody present to please turn off electronic devices, mobile phones included, iPads and tablets, for the duration of the meeting. Tonight's special council meeting is being recorded and a copy of the audio recording will be on the city's website within 72 hours of the completion of the meeting. And the remainder of the disclaimer can be seen on screen. Councillors, as apparently is the way, I'd like to read a short speech just to obviously to commemorate tonight's special council meeting, which was an important one for this council and for the city. Welcome to this evening's special council meeting regarding the adoption of the City of Canning's 2020-21 annual budget. The draft 2020-21 budget is a significant one for our city and has been modelled during a unique period of global uncertainty, which will be long remembered and perhaps for all the wrong reasons. It's been drafted with a particular focus, which is to help our community to recover from the economic and social impacts of COVID-19, and in doing so, Canning will also be directly contributing to the recovery of Western Australia. Included in the draft budget are the commitments contained in the $16.5 million budget relief package, which Council announced in April this year. This included a freeze on rate revenue in recognition that a number of our residents are experiencing unforeseen hardship. The budget relief package also included no increase to residential or non-residential rates, no increase in the waste service fees, transfer station fees or the security charge, deferral of any new underground power charges for 12 months, a waiving of inspection fees for food businesses, rental abatements granted with regard to rent for city-owned premises, delay of the first rate instalment due date to November 2020, extended payment terms and concessions on interest charges in accordance with the financial hardship policy FM13. We'll be maintaining creditor terms of under 14 days for all small and medium businesses to assist them with their cash flow. Appropriate allocation of funds for the Connecting Canning project to support community-led initiatives and the connection to vulnerable people identified through community support. A suspension of interest charges and penalties for ratepayers, and the bringing forward of capital projects that stimulate the local economy, create jobs and keep people in work. Council is also bringing forward significant future capital works to stimulate our local economy and to help boost local jobs. And some highlights of tonight's budget include $20.8 million to manage urban forests, parks, sporting reserves and sustainability initiatives, over $1 million supporting community participation and community activation, $3.6 million dedicated to community safety, $12 million to maintain and expand transport infrastructure, $15.4 million to manage our waste and recycling, $26.5 million to provide, expand and improve our community facilities, and $13.5 million to manage our recreational centres. And a more comprehensive list of projects will be made available on the city's website. They were just some of the highlights. Essentially, in real terms, in 2021, we will spend a total of $162 million. This spending is not only for now, it's also for the future of the City of Canning. If approved tonight, more than 99% of all City of Canning ratepayers will pay less or the same amount in rates as they did last year, and that includes 100% of all of our residential ratepayers. We are playing our part to stimulate the economy, as we must, and by utilising existing and borrowed funds, we've been able to bring forward major projects to support local businesses, generate jobs, and to keep Canning moving. It was with compassion in mind, balanced with the financial responsibility entrusted to us by our community, that we set out to build our 2021 budget, and I'm very proud of what Council and the City's administration have achieved together. Many hours and many late nights by Council and the City staff have resulted in tonight's draft budget, and I'd like to take the opportunity publicly to acknowledge the commitment of so many people and those involved. I'd also like to thank those members of the public who engaged with the City and put forward their views in emails, on social media or through written submissions. Your opinions were valuable and have been considered by Council. Council sees this budget as a living document. These uncertain times require agile decision-making and sound financial management, and going forward it's our intention to regularly review the 2021 budget in response to material changes in the economy which may impact on Canning's finances going forward. Finally, I very much look forward to working together with my fellow councillors and of course our community to set Canning on the path to recovery, and tonight's draft budget will be the first step in that process. Thank you, everyone. Just in relation to attendances this evening at item 2 on tonight's agenda, Councillor Sabiri's an apology for tonight's meeting. Approved leave of absence, there is none. Disclosure of interest. Chief Executive Officer, are there any disclosures for this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a disclosure of impartiality from Councillor Sweeney in relation to CC-035-20, page 3 of the confidential agenda, intermodal freight and logistics, opportunities for the City of Canning, and the nature of the association is Councillor Sweeney is a resident and operates and owns a business in Canning Vale.
Thank you, CEO. That takes care of items 3.1 and 3.2. At item 4, question time for the public. Mr Aldridge, if you'd like to step forward, I understand you've got a few questions. I'll just open public question time now. The time is 6:07 p.m. I will read just for the purpose of the recording, Mr Aldridge, and sorry to hold you up. I'll get you to state your name and address and then state your question. If the answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer provided at the next ordinary council meeting. In accordance with policy ADO2, members of the public who have registered their questions, and you have, shall be called upon in order in which registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions. Mr Aldridge, obviously tonight questions need to be related to tonight's agenda, which is the budget, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. What cost-cutting measures has the CEO and his administration implemented since the start of COVID-19 and the resultant economic downturn?
CEO, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Mr Aldridge. What's happened is that we have, as a part of putting this budget together, reviewed our current costings as an organisation. Those cuts have been incorporated within the budget, and we are making ongoing investigations into other cost reduction methods within the organisation. So it's an ongoing process that we've adopted as an organisation. As the Mayor has said in his introduction, this is a living budget, so as we go forward we'll continue to review those costs, and where necessary we will make those decisions at an operational level, and where necessary those decisions may have to be brought to Council. Thank you.
Mr Aldridge, your second question.
Thank you. Even though, according to the news, we're facing the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, is it really the best that the administration and this council can do to just keep rates the same? Can we not maybe try to think of rebates for people who have been affected by COVID-19?
Mr Adams, I might get you to respond if you don't mind.
Yep. So there's a number of measures we put in place to reduce the financial burden on ratepayers in the City of Canning. So you'll note that within the budget we're not charging instalment interest, we're not charging penalty interest. We've removed some fees and charges. We have looked at different payment options. We've introduced a financial hardship policy. So anyone that is affected by the COVID-19 downturn can contact the City, especially if they're having trouble paying their rates, and look at alternate payment arrangements. There is the potential to defer some of their rates for a period of time under the financial hardship policy. So we have incorporated a number of measures within this budget to reduce the financial burden on those people most affected by the COVID-19 downturn.
And your final question, Mr Aldridge?
To my understanding, out of the $16 million worth of COVID relief, about 11.5 million of that is just bringing forward capital works. In what way does bringing forward capital works help the average ratepayer as far as COVID-19 goes?
Mr Adams.
So one of the roles that local government is required to play in the economy is to help stimulate jobs and help keep the economy ticking over. Bringing forward capital works projects obviously provides the opportunity for local contractors and people employed by local contractors, people employed by contractors more generally, to continue to be employed and provide services to ensure that those projects are completed. So a lot of those brought forward projects are intended to, or all of those projects are intended to help stimulate the economy and provide jobs for people. So I think that's an important role that this council saw in the recovery from the COVID-19 economic downturn.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate it.
Mayor, good night, Council.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. There have been no further questions. I'll close question time now to 6:12 p.m. Thank you very much. At item 5 on tonight's agenda, the receiving of petitions, presentations and deputations. Petitions, there are none. As far as presentations go, at item 5.2, I call upon Mr Steve Leeson, the Executive Manager of Business Canning. He will now make a presentation regarding the 2021 annual budget. Mr Leeson, please step forward and welcome. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'll probably be able to keep it a little bit briefer than intended, because you've covered it off so well in your opening address, Mr Mayor. The annual budget certainly was put together in the most sort of unlikely of circumstances. I'll turn that on. Thank you. Still guided by the city's budget preparation policy, FM05, it truly is an emergency budget in response to the impacts of COVID-19. Setting aside by ministerial order our long-term financial plan, really to introduce specific strategies to help us with the effects of COVID-19. The strategies being around that freeze on total rates revenue, making allowances for those ratepayers who unfortunately might find themselves in the financial hardship, as well as the city playing its role to create that local economic stimulus just asked about. Whilst at the same time, still including local area initiatives as identified by elected members. I won't run through all of these because they were mentioned earlier, but it was back in April when Council really started thinking about what the effects of COVID-19 would be upon the 2021 budget, with a number of items to include within the drafting of the budget, as well as that notice of motion that did suspend interest charges and penalties on overdue, giving further relief to our ratepayers and community. It was always going to be a challenge to I guess, express this budget to the community with having a reval undertaken of all the gross rental values, meaning that the rating apportionments were going to be different to what the previous year was, when there was a lot of media attention given to that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misunderstanding in our community with the role of GRVs and how they play in apportioning our rates. And many would be expecting a decrease as a result of the rate of their GRV falling. But since 2000, the city has consistently reset the rate in the dollar downwards as the GRVs have gone up. And now that we're in this sort of inverse situation, the GRV, whilst it's going down, the rate in the dollar will go up, and that's the mechanism we use to maintain rating at around the same levels. The process that we need to go through now that we have differential rating, which does allow us to maintain apportionments in a lot more consistent way, was to go out to the community. And we went out via the West Australian by placing an ad in the Saturdays West, but also using our Your Say feedback platform, and received a number of submissions that came through to that, with 49 responses coming through, plus 2 written submissions as well. And a number of responses made mention of COVID-19, the changes in GRVs, values, wanting to maintain rates at previous amounts, but also mentioning hardship and looking for rebates. The first model which we put together and went out advertising with would have seen quite a lot of change, and we recognise that, and hence committed to undertaking further rates modelling, because the model, the traditional model, would have seen those 12,000 pay more and 14,000 pay less, with an additional 2,000 ratepayers moving on to a minimum charge. So undertaking that, a bit more work on that, introduced the use of a concession to see if we could further minimise the increases, so that 99% basically would pay the same or less by introducing a concession up to an amount of $2,000. That would be checked back against the amount of rating that would have been incurred for 1920 as compared to this new model. Just to step through, just got 3 quick slides to get through here, just to highlight some of the major comparisons between last year's budget and the proposed 2021 budget. The first one there being rating. Whilst we have called it a freeze on rates, there is always that element of growth that comes through. And so we wanted to make sure that that element of growth wasn't used to discount the existing ratepayers, because that wasn't consistent with the goal of trying to maintain everyone's rates the same as the previous year. The fees and charges being down, mostly through user fees, through Leisureplex, the commitment to try and help our local businesses through health, and not expecting as many building and planning applications to come through, whilst taking quite a significant reduction on our interest earnings. The employee costs are the ones that have been reduced, most notably under operating expenditure, through the intention of no backfill of staff, reduced training amounts, and targeting our leave liabilities as well. Looking at the non-operating part of the budget, capital expenditure, as mentioned earlier, it's the brought forward stimulus works that are the most significant change in comparison there, being funded by a commitment to use next year's, the 21-22 amount of rates, loan funding, as well as our reserves. And the amount of borrowings is reflected under capital revenue there. As you can see, we've got commitments to the Whaleback Golf Course, land assets, city centre, as well as the brought forward reserves, brought forward capital works being funded from loans as well as reserves. So then, just in closing, the budget does contain a lot of features for our community. So as mentioned, 99% will pay the same or less. The rating concessions will appear on everyone's rate notice as a separate line. We've got good comms that will go out with regards to that. We've taken away the instalment and penalty interest and deferred those payment due dates as mentioned. And the hardship policy is referred to on the rates notice, and people may make contact with us to enter into even further alternative payment arrangements if they like. Operating expenditure has been reduced. We've got a fair amount of capital works on budget. But being that we have had a lot of challenges in trying to pull this budget together, and with those shortfalls in revenue and not pushing up the rates, it does mean that it is a deficit budget. I know we had talked about it being 500 before, but we've made that allowance in there for the New Year's Day fireworks event, which will come through for a separate consideration. At the moment though, the 2019-20 budget was also forecast to be a deficit position. I think the numbers have come in a little bit better than that by final count. So the two together would be the deficit position that we'd expect ourselves to be in 30th of June 21, which we will recoup over subsequent years' budgets going forward. And with that, Mr Mayor, is a summary of the 21 budget for you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Leeson. Very much appreciated, and I do note a number of your staff sitting in the audience tonight, and I'm sure Council would like to thank them for their work over the last few months, so thank you. At item 5.3, deputations, there are none. Item 6, reports. Councillors, we come to our first report of the night. Of course, the responsible officer is Director Gary Adams, the Director of Canning Community and Commercial. The item is CC 048 of 20. The title of the item is 2020-21 Fees and Charges. The officer recommendation is on the screen, and it appears on page 4 of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover, please, councillors? Councillor Barry, thank you very much. Seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Barry.
Nothing further to add. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Holland, have you got anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm in favour of it. Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak on the matter? No, thank you. We will put this to the vote.
Motion CC-048-20 has been carried unanimously, 10 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We move to item CC 049 of 20. The title is 2020-21 Rate Charges. The officer's recommendation is now on the screen. Thank you, Governance. And the recommendation appears on page 21 of the agenda. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Ponaturai, thank you very much. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Not much to say, just acknowledgement and a thank you to the staff who have worked on this. I think this is possibly the best case scenario that we could have come up with. So thank you and well done.
Councillor Ponaturai, would you like to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, the best modelling and analysis has been done, and happy to move this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ponaturai. Anyone else like to speak on this before we put it to the vote? Councillor Barry.
Thanks, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor. In relation to number 4, 647, the charitable purposes one, is there another section under the Act which that covers that? Just for my clarification.
Director Adams, is that something you're able
Take it on notice
to answer tonight or take on notice?
Yeah, I can take that on notice. Yep. Councillor Barry, just probably need a bit more clarification around exactly what your question is, but I can take that offline and speak to you about that afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor Barry.
Okay, and on our rates notice, I presume, or I would ask whether 647 would be given as just for this year, not for next year, unless things get worse, obviously. We let people know that. And the other one, just in the exemptions, and you can take this on notice, on page 36, there's probably about half a dozen exemptions through the Department of Housing for Victoria Park youth accommodation. Could I please know what the addresses of those are? That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take those on notice. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to say before we put the matter to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Let's put this to the vote.
Motion CC-049-20 is being carried by absolute majority, 10 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. We move on to CC 050. The title of the report is 2020-21 Rates, Payments and Incentive Scheme. The officer's recommendation is now on the screen. It is now. The recommendation is also on page 51 of tonight's agenda. I just have the Deputy Mayor with his hand up. So a mover is our Deputy Mayor, Jesse Jacobs, and the seconder will be Councillor Lindsay Holland. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I welcome this. Ironically, I didn't vote for it, but I've come round to it. it's a good idea in a very difficult situation that the nation and globally face. So well done for people that moved it, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Jacobs. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a very good thing that we can offer our ratepayers the whole part of this recommendation, 1 right through to 7. I think it is a way, as Mr Audrey said, how we're helping our ratepayers out. I think this is a substantial way. As I mentioned when I moved the first on number 1, I think we're going to find a lot of people will go on instalments. So any way we can help them out this year, I think is going to be beneficial. But that's all, but I speak in favour of it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, councillors. Just before we go on, I've just something I need to read. The CEO advises me there's a necessary small change to the first sentence in paragraph 24 of the report, just for the record. It's not material, but I'll read it. The date of 11th September 2020 is quoted. That should read 25 September. And amendment, let me see. The reference to $1,000 should be $1,100. This changes that sentence to read, it should read, and I quote, all City of Canning ratepayers who have paid their rates up front and in full by September the 25th, 2020, including all arrears, will go into the draw to win one of 10 shopping centre vouchers of $1,100 purchased by the City, close brackets, full stop. So it's not material, but I just wanted to bring it to the attention of Council. Councillor Barry, you had your hand up. You'd like to ask a question or speak on it?
No, it's just to speak on it, unlikely. Just in relation to the officer's recommendations, I support it, but I would certainly ask those people who do take the time to read the minutes or listen to the audio that if they can, and I know I'll be one of them, that to pay their rates where they can, because if we all pull together, basically, maybe some of the loans, the drawdowns, we won't have to do. So I'd encourage everybody who can pay their rates to please do so. Thank you.
I just, from the chair, I'd like to thank you for raising that and echo that sentiment. It's very important for those in the community who have the capacity to pay their rates on time. I know Mr Leeson will agree, but it's imperative that people who have the capacity to pay their rates on time, please do so. That will immeasurably help the city's finances over what will be a very difficult next 12 months and probably beyond. So thank you very much for that. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Spencer-Teo.
If I can just jump on the bandwagon as well, seeing in point 20, the city spends $170,000 on printing and posting. So if we can register for E-rates, obviously that's a significant saving as well.
Agreed. Anybody else? Deputy Mayor, no one has spoken against it, so I will put the matter to the vote. Thank you, councillors.
Motion CC-050-20 has been carried by absolute majority with 10 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We move to item CC-051 of 20. The title of the report is 2020-21 Annual Budget. The officer's recommendation is on the screen and can be found on page 63 of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover? That will be Councillor Ponaturai. Thank you, Councillor Ponaturai, and Councillor Kunza. Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that my background in financial management and accounting, the budget is very close to my heart. So 2021 budget is framed in an environment, as you mentioned earlier in your speech, where the revenue and indeed our way of life has been severely disrupted with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is very important that the council is, much as it is able to give support to our community during this time. I also commend that Councillor Holland for his notice of motion suspending the interest charges and penalties ratepayers, which was supported by a majority of the council. The effect of this suspension of interest and penalties interest rates is to give support to all ratepayers in the city and in a direct and effective manner. But this causes challenges for our cash flow. However, the city's financial budget team has found an effective model to mitigate this. And we're also fortunate the WA Treasury Corporation is extending the lending facility. Hope we might be able to use that, or we will have to. And also part of the COVID-19 situation, we have come up with some economic stimulus program. Capital projects, about 14.5 million worth of projects are brought forward in order to provide some economic stimulus within the city. While council cannot provide the sort of stimulus as the state and federal governments can, we do need to play our own part in helping our community. It is in the council's policy to encourage local business to tender the council's contracts wherever possible, and it is my hope that we will be able to give work on these economic stimulus projects to local people. So this is about creating local jobs and opportunity for local businesses. I would hope to see a workshop run for the local businesses, especially at the crisis time. While the Connect Canning project is not a big ticket budget item of this area, but I believe that will have a great impact for the Canning community in connecting people across the community and creating economic activity. In these times where many of us are unable to see our families face to face, that connections with others can reduce our hardship and unhappiness. And also I'm very excited to see a number of capital works projects have been brought forward. There are a couple in my area, in my ward, which I'm extremely excited. For example, the Willetton Football Club. I've been fortunate to become involved in the Willetton Football Club, at least part because of my focus on empowering women, and Willetton is actively participating in the women's football competition. By assisting the Women's Change Rooms, Council is helping to foster a spirit of community and solidarity between the players. I hope that this will attract more women to participate in competitive football and other sports across the city of Canning. And one of the objects of the Connect Canning project is to assist people in maintaining mental and emotional stability and well-being through their contacts with other people. I believe that participation in sports and arts activities, I hope that will create a further context and support for many of us. On number of projects I just wanted to mention, especially the Rostrada Family Center, which about nearly 30 user groups using, and so there's a kindergarten is coming up and is a very important user center, and there's a provision for this in the enhanced kindergarten building will make life easier for all the users and management. And most exciting, Hillview Multicultural Community Center. As a migrant myself, I'm very pleased that we have allocated funds for the refurbishment of the Hillview Multicultural Center. I thank Mayor and the fellow councillors as well as the city staff for the work that they have done in developing this budget, and I commend it to you all. We have gone through much debate and aired our different opinions. I'm glad that we have been able to arrive at a budget, and I believe provides the needs of the people of Canning in circumstances that are very trying for us all. I urge you all to add up this budget and continue to support our community, and special thanks to Mr. Steve Leeson and his team. And thank you so much for everybody, and looking forward for this challenging 2021 year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just want to say from the outset, thank you very much to the staff for all your work in these extremely challenging times. Not only has a number of staff within the organisation confronted uncertainty and in a challenging period none of us ever expected to go through, but you've jumped a number of hurdles, some of which you didn't expect, dealing with the cash flow issues, but also coming up with that model in terms of making sure that 99.74% of ratepayers will pay the same or less is an extraordinarily great outcome. And I don't know how many local governments would have been able to say that unless they, like some of our neighbours, had a lot in their cash reserves to be able to do that. But to come out and provide that model, it's a great indictment of yourselves and how well you perform your roles. Look, we actually had quite a lot of people comment on it compared to normal. Still probably less than I thought would have happened, but there was a bit of negativity on social media and so forth, but I mean, to look at our rate in the dollar, it's still less than it was 20 years ago. And I think that what the city's been able to do through this budget, removing certain fees and charges, freezing many of the fees and charges, removing penalty interest and instalment charges, and then looking at how we can absorb the costs through the budget, many of which are still increasing, is a great outcome. And I think that should be looked at more positively. Obviously, we'll need to regularly monitor and update as things change, and it'll be interesting to see how many people use the financial hardship policy and use hopefully fewer than more. I'm just fingers crossed for the amount of people out there struggling. But I'm also glad to see that we're now taking the opportunity again to send out information in the rates about what we're doing, because I never quite understood that we didn't do that. And I hope that people become more informed about what the city is doing, because every opportunity to do that is an opportunity we should take. But yeah, it's great to be part of an organisation like this. I just want to thank everyone for their work over the last few months.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzer. Anyone else like to say anything? Councillor Holland, go right ahead.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd like to reiterate a lot of Councillor Yasso Ponathuro's comments as well. I think that was extremely well said, and you put a lot of thought of it. And I'd like to agree totally with Councillor Kunzer's comments regarding the staff and Director Adams' area, and Steve Leeson and the people down the back. Please excuse me if I don't mention you all by name, but I am actually astonished that we've got such a good budget in such trying times. I think you've done an absolutely fantastic job to bring just such a little, pardon me, deficit. I need a scotch. Such a little deficit. I was expecting more. I think what we brought with the capital works projects coming forward as an economic stimulus that kind of Councillor Ponathuro mentioned are great. I think this is, I'll read a couple of things that I actually wrote down here. I think this is a responsible budget, it's an ethical budget, and it's a positive budget. And to be quite honest, this is probably my 5th budget. I don't think I've ever said this before, but I am actually really proud of this budget. I'm proud of the work that you guys have done. I'm proud to be a councillor on the City of Canning and to come out with something here that I think actually works for as many people and many ratepayers as we possibly can in these times. And like I said before, I think it's still going to get worse before it gets better. But I think we've set our course on a very, very good trajectory here, and as much as and as good as we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Anybody else? Councillor Barry.
I'll have a bash while I can still stand up.
You okay?
Yeah. No drama. Look, I'll probably keep it a bit shorter. I'd probably offer another congratulations to Councillor Holland for his dogged determination, but I won't because he's already had one. Just in relation, first and foremost, and I'm speaking for the annual budget. I did have a conversation with the people in finance, and basically it was related to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And from my perspective, I'm not aware that I ever heard of that in all of our workshops, but I'm happy to be corrected if that is not the case. And I also go back to a conversation that I had with you, Mr. Mayor, where you said that you had been in touch with a couple of the ministers and plenty of money around for local governments, to the point where even this morning I was still a little bit perturbed, so I rang up the Treasurer and he assured me that there would be no 0.7 whatever, we would be exempt from that, and if the $100 million was oversubscribed, then he would extend it. And he said that to quote him on that as well. So as I said before, I support the budget because it at least shows, and from my perspective, I'll probably see it a little bit different from the financial people, that this council has in some ways or many ways looked after the most vulnerable in our community. And it shows that we actually care about the position that some of the ratepayers and residents now find themselves in, and what may be a set of more unfortunate circumstances come September. Now, I don't suppose I'm known for my platitudes, but I would like to thank the administration for playing their part in drawing this budget together as it is tonight. The budget, as I said, was relatively easy for me to support for the reasons stated earlier, as well as because it does save some precious dollars for those worse off presently. Next year, next financial year, maybe a lot worse than 2021. But we'll deal with that when that one comes. The same empathy and practicalities as we have tonight. Even speaking to myself, while I was asking myself, is this the best budget we could have done? Probably not, but it's very close, very, very close. And there's more in it that I agree with than disagree, so I would support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barry. Look, I agree with everything, obviously, that has been said. I would make just one observation. I think in some strange way, and Councillor Holland touched on the word pride. He mentioned how proud he was of tonight's budget. I share that sentiment because I think in some strange way, the budget process has actually brought this council together in the last couple of months. So we've had a lot of conversations behind closed doors, but I'm so proud that tonight we've come together united and unanimously, whilst I don't wish to preempt this final item, but we have come together unanimously in concert publicly, and people will know that this budget adopted tonight has been done so with the full support of its full council. Very pleased to hear the platitudes from Councillor Barry. It's never too late to start. No, I'm really pleased with that because I think in some strange way, even some of us, we've been able to acquaint ourselves with members of staff we may not have had close relationships with previously before. And I think that can only be a good thing for this council moving forward. So I think just from a decision-making point of view, I'm just really proud of tonight's performance by council. So that's all I've got to say. Anyone else like to speak on it before I put it to the vote? No one's spoken against the item, so without any further ado, I'll put this final item, apart from our confidential matter, to the vote. Thank you, councillors.
Item CC-051-20, the annual budget, has been carried by absolute majority with 10 in favour.
Thank you very much. We'll just move on now to confidential matters. I don't think we've got any members of the public present, but nevertheless, for the sake of the record, I will read the blurb. I thank members of the public for their attendance tonight and ask that they please leave the chamber in order for council to consider the confidential matter. I'll get that door closed if you don't mind as you leave. Thank you very much. Can I have a mover and a seconder, councillors, please, that the item, which is item CC-03520, intermodal freight and logistics opportunities for the City of Canning, be dealt with behind closed doors in accordance with section 5.23, subsection 2 of the Local Government Act 1995. Councillor Barry, thank you, and Councillor Bain. Councillor Barry, anything to add? Councillor Bain?
Nothing further to add, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. We will then now move to confidential matters, and the time now is 6:43 p.m. Oh, sorry, we haven't voted on yet. We'll put that to the vote.
The motion to close doors for confidential session has been carried unanimously, 10 in favour.
We'll now return to a public meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder to reopen the meeting to the public? That'll be Councillor Spencer Teo as the mover and Councillor Porter. Thank you, Councillor Porter, as the seconder. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Nothing to add, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Nothing to add, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. We'll put this to the vote.
The motion to reopen the doors to the public has been carried unanimously, 10 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. That being the case, the time is now 6:59 p.m. and I announce the meeting has now been reopened to the public. I'm going to read aloud the decision. I'll get. Can I get that up on the board, please? Councillors, I'll just read the decision for the sake of the record. Sorry? Gone again, is it? Did it? It was moved Councillor Ponaturo, seconded Councillor Porter. The Council adopts the recommendation as outlined in paragraph 41 of this report, and that relates to CC 035 of 20. The title of the report. I'll read the title of the report.
Intermodal freight logistics opportunities for the City of Canning.
That's right. Sorry, the title of the report was Intermodal Freight and Logistics Opportunities for the City of Canning. Councillors, thanks very much. That concludes tonight's deliberations. I very much appreciate it. I announce that there will be no further business. I declare the meeting closed. The time has now clicked over to 7 p.m. and I'd like to thank everybody very much for their attendance. Good night.